Salem, Massachusetts, Savannah, Georgia, New Orleans, Louisiana, all places known for paranormal activity. But what about Hawaii? The popular vacation spot has a lesser-known reputation for the spooky and an even lesser-known history and culture. My next guest is a native Hawaiian who was adopted by a non-Hawaiian family and raised Catholic. When he was 7, he died during a medical procedure, and his near-death experience left him with some unusual gifts and an open door to connecting back to his culture. He now celebrates over 25 years of owning and operating Hawaii's only locally owned ghost tour company, Mysteries of Hawaii. And today, he's going to talk about all of it, the cultural, the historical, and the paranormal, as we ask the question, is Hawaii haunted? Actor, author, connector of the living and the dead, Lopaka Kapanui. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making time for this.
Oh, aloha. Good morning. Yeah, I mean, anything that's fun, I have time for.
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much. I was, cyber stalking you as one does. I mean that in the most loving and non-psychopathic way possible, of course. But I was learning all about your near-death experience and how afterwards your mom, when you said to her, Mom, I'm, having all of these, I'm seeing dead people essentially, and I'm, seeing and hearing things that I didn't see and hear before. And her response seemed a little nonchalant. She was like, yeah, we're Hawaiian. That's what happens. Can you explain that? What does that mean?
My mom herself was also very steeped in a certain spiritual practice that was passed down in our family. And a lot of that involved communicating with particular kinds of spirits, especially broken spirits, people who died without resolving issues. And so when I said that to her, she's like, yeah, it's because we're Hawaiian and here's why this is going on. And you're not going to go to hell. You're not evil or anything. And the explanation was just so practical, so common sense and applicable that even at that age, I'm like, really?
Right. Yeah, because this was your birth mom, not your adopted parents that you were talking to.
Yeah. And so the fortunate thing is, I was able to stay in contact with my biological mom. And after my sorry.
It's okay.
After my adopted mom had passed away, and communication with my biological mother became a lot more frequent. And so, that's how that whole world opened.
And in the Hawaiian language, there's no word for supernatural, I understand, because everything is natural, including visits from your ancestors who have passed away. Is that correct?
Yeah. And you think about it, it's a very, very Buddhist explanation, because in certain forms of Buddhism, it's important that in order for your life to function clearly, there has to be this oneness with yourself and your surroundings. And the thing about the Hawaiian culture is that within your surroundings are these myriad of gods and beings and lesser beings. And so in ancient times, the Hawaiian people had to depend on their environment for their physical sustenance, but also spiritually, they had to be at one. So everything worked in harmony. And so one of my teachers, knowing what I did, he said, there's really no Hawaiian word for supernatural. He said, if you look in the Hawaiian dictionary, it's a westernized explanation for the supernatural. But he said there's really, really no word in our vocabulary that exists to describe that. And, like you just said, because everything functioned naturally as a part of your environment.
I kind of like that. I think it's certainly for your progression and your story, it gave you, an anchor, like a sense of like, oh, it's going to be okay. There's no reason to be overly afraid. I read that in the Hawaiian culture, in the Hawaiian tradition, that there were people who maybe had heightened abilities to hear from people who were passed away, like from spirits, and that those people were trained in honing in their gifts and became, what we call mediums. Is that the spiritual practice that your mom practiced that you kind of referred to a minute ago?
Wow, you've really done your homework.
Thanks.
I'm really impressed. Yeah, the Hawaiian word for that thing is called haka. And so, as you were saying, in every generation, one person is picked out, put aside, because they're beginning to express, these gifts, and they're specifically trained in what is called noho, which might be mediumship or channeling. And what happens is that person receives the ancestor who would noho or sit on their shoulders and communicate through them to the family. So that would be a deceased ancestor, an ancient ancestor, or an ancestral god or being. And my aunt was also a haka in her family. And our primary guardian is a shark god called Kamohoali'i, and he's the eldest sacred brother of the goddess Pele. And so he would sit on our aunt's shoulder and communicate to the family through her. And everything I heard about him up until then was like he was, just terrible character, just fierce. And every time his spirit was in the room, it would just reek of, that, I don't want to say that rotten fish smell, but,
like sulfur,
there.
like sulfur smell.
Sulfur, and yeah. And my aunt said, no, that's not true. He's actually, purposely like that because he likes to mess with people, but he's very funny and he makes jokes. I remember my aunt saying, and then he had, it's this ancient being, but he had this favorite Hawaiian song that he loved. And she looked at my mom. She goes, sing that song for him. So, we know, he knows what we're talking about. And I said, that's kind of hard to believe because this is like a guardian ancestor. And my aunt said, well, that doesn't mean they don't have fun and, they don't like things. And my mom's thing was also to, channel or haka, particular kind of ancestors who had to get through for important messages. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's basically the thing that was passed on to me. And what's good and bad about that is, people come through who need to get a specific message, so there's closure. And the bad thing is the spirits, if I'm at a ghost storytelling concert and the place is standing room only, which it tends to be, somebody's ancestor and ancestors in the audience will hijack the show and not let me continue until I say something, until I connect them to someone who's in the audience. And it happens a lot.
Wow. Well, I could see where that would be part of the appeal too. There's a lot of appeal in really pop culture, certainly not when you were growing up as much with outside of your, the Hawaiian culture. But I think if it weren't popular generally now, why would Travel Channel, you're on those shows sometimes, the Travel Channel, this Discovery Channel, right? There's a, I don't know, I was going to say popification. I'm pretty sure that's not a word, but, there's this mainstream version of these sacred traditions that have come about, witches on Instagram and, just all this sort of stuff. And Ouija boards have always been a thing. Is there any part of this that, I don't know, people should approach with caution? Because if you approach it with like it's entertainment and it's fun and it's all nonsense, then people run towards it because they love spooky things, right? Halloween.
Right.
But if you approach it from an ancestral spiritual tradition, I feel like we should probably have some more respect. And then there's like this middle, perspective of, okay, if this stuff is real, shouldn't we be more cautious about what we're letting into our own consciousness? Does any of that make any sense?
Absolutely. And the good aspect of working with people, like you said, from Travel Channel, Learning Channel, all that stuff, is once I explain, what's going on, a lot of them have a tendency to say, wait a minute. They're like, wait, hold on. So this is actually a thing, like it's real. And like, yeah. Like, okay, now we got to approach this a bit differently. And so the best way to approach these things is not just with respect, but with some reverence and some common sense. And so here it's always been a thing not just in Hawaiian tradition, but now local tradition, to always ask permission, spiritually or just in general, because it's common local courtesy. So, even if you're sitting there and the room is crowded and I have to get by you, I'm not just going to barrel my way through. I'm going to say, "Hey, Meredith, would it be okay if I, pass through here? I see you're having a drink. I don't want to disturb, your time with your friends." Stuff like that. Really simple stuff. And in situations where, say, you're at the volcano and, you need to do something, go somewhere, make an offering, it might seem ridiculous, but a lot of us here will speak to the goddess Pele and say, Tutu, I need to go to this place and pick this flower. I know it grows here. It belongs to you. And a lot of times you do get an answer. A wind will come out of nowhere, just this fine mist of rain, and all those things are little signals telling you it's okay.
You said,
and if it's not okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that when you talk about intention and permission, you said in another interview that those two concepts, intention and permission, are just really key in Hawaiian culture. And even the illustration that you're giving now of, going up to a place and asking permission to take a piece of the nature with you. How does that play in your tours? Because you're taking a busload of people to a place that either has historical significance or known paranormal activity. Do you ask, permission of the spirits that are there to, hey, I'm bringing all these non-Hawaiian people to tell them the story of you. I hope you think that's okay. How does that play out?
Even before we walk into the place, I offer a chant in Hawaiian. And the chant is always specific to that place and those spirits. And again, like you just said, it's basically announcing your intention and what you intend to do while you're there, what you're going to do after you leave. And also asking for the protection of everyone in the group. And, to make sure that the journey is safe and it flows well. And everybody leaves, feeling good with no attachments. And so, a lot of times, a lot of people who live here, along with tourists, are just, kind of like blown away. And they always tell me, and I never thought about that. I never thought about announcing my reasons or my intention about anything. But it's important because it raises the energy, and the whole experience is at a higher level rather than just walking in and barreling through.
Yeah, I like the mindfulness aspect that comes with that. You're really present. You're not just barreling through. I like the way you worded that too. Is there a link between ghost storytelling and, the preservation of Hawaiian cultural knowledge? Do you feel?
The thing about ghost storytelling is that in one aspect, it's there to, just scare the hell out of you. And in another aspect, there's always a moral lesson as to why you don't do this or why you don't say that. And it's sort of a reminder for us as living people, not only to be connected to our spirituality, but to be respectful and to conduct ourselves in our daily lives in a certain way so that everything works. And it sounds cliche, but everything works, in harmony, in perfect unison. So the moment things are out of whack and things are out of balance is when, spirits start to pop up and do things that you're not too happy about.
And you have a few stories personally of spirits popping up, don't you?
God, there's so much trouble. They really are.
So many. And I love them all. There's so many interesting stories that, that's how I came across you as a story rabbit trail. So yeah, I would love to hear, ones that stand out to you that you've personally experienced.
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of times it's like a Seinfeld episode where they just show up and interrupt, like, what are you doing?
They don't know their stage cue, and cue the spirit. They're just like, oh, there's people gathered. It's my time to shine. Jazz hands.
I know. We had a ghost storytelling concert in the last week of June at a historic Hawaii theater. And the short story is, by the end of the thing, spirits were lining up off stage, because they just started coming through and, communicating to people in the audience. There was one woman named Irene Foster who was coming through from the beginning. And toward the end, I said, okay, so this is the fourth time. No one's claimed her, but Irene Foster. And someone in the audience, and it's dark. I can't really see the house, but it's an older man's voice. And he says, Irene J. Foster, I was her caretaker till the end. She passed away. And I said, yes, it was cancer. And he said, yes, it was. And it took her really quick. And she was a beautiful woman and just so full of life. I felt it wasn't fair. And so I said to this man, I couldn't see her. I said, she's here to tell you that she appreciates you being there. In spite of everything else you have, your responsibilities, you made it a point to be with her all the way to the end. And I said, and that's because she was afraid to die alone. And you were there. And the second that happened, everybody else's mom, dad, dog on the stage coming through. Hey, I want to talk to him. Like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine what that would be like. Like, that's just such a foreign concept to me. Tell me, can you share the story of your experience with Pele? Because I love that story specifically because it illustrates like the cultural deepness of the island, and it also teaches a lesson of respect. But it's also happened to you. So to me, it's such a fun trifecta of features. So if you don't mind sharing that story.
Oh, is that the one with the pizza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pele and the pizza. We'll name this chapter of our chat, Pele and the pizza.
Yes. Yeah, it was 2005. And my wife back then and my daughter were coming back home from something, and I dropped them off at our little apartment, but I had to park in the main street called Date Street. It's this long stretch of road. And I parked, got out of the car on the driver's side and looked up, and there's this old Hawaiian woman, white hair, very dark skin. And it kind of threw me off because she was wearing a black turtleneck sweater and a black and white plaid skirt, like, the Catholic schoolgirl kind of thing. And even from where I was standing, like looking through the car window, I could see she was wearing these knee-high white mod boots. I thought, this is weird. Like, she must be homeless or crazy. And this is all within seconds. And she looks at me and she says, take me to Zippy's. I said, what? She says, take me to Zippy's. And I was going to go to Jack in the Box real quick and, come back home. I said, well, I'm not going that way, but I can drop you near it because I'm going over there. And she says, no, not that Zippy's. I want to go to the one in Wahiawa. And I said, Wahiawa? That's like on the other side of the island. Like, I'm not going that way, but if you want, I'll take you, to the Zippy's down here. And she says, please, I'm hungry. And I glanced down in the backseat of the car, and there's this big Chuck E. Cheese pizza. And I said, well, listen, I have some pizza over here if you wanted some cheese pizza. She says, okay. And I go like this, reach into the car and grab it and pull it out. And I was going to, just pass it over the hood of the car or the roof of the car. And she's gone. And the way that main road is situated, it's such a long stretch of road that there's no way anyone can walk to or from without you seeing them come or go. But she was gone. She was not there. And this is within seconds. And right after that realization, like this car just like mad speeds right past me. It's going so fast, you get the jet wash, kind of shakes things. And it blows the intersection and it gets T-boned, like just totally creamed. Horrible accident. And I realized within those few seconds, that was supposed to be me.
Whoa.
I was supposed to be that car in that accident. And so it was Pele in this unusual incarnation to sort of distract me and get my attention to face this way and not get in the car, which is what that whole negotiation between going to one place and the other was all about.
Wow. That's crazy. And she was just gone, no trace of her at all.
Nothing, just completely gone.
Have you ever had a visit or seen Queen Liliuokalani at all?
There was a night when you were able to walk the grounds of the palace in the evening until 11 o'clock. But because of the homeless, they now close it at 6. So the short story is, I always offer this particular chant while standing at the bottom of the window looking out, because their old room is on the 2nd floor. And the fortunate thing is, I saw it, but I thought I was seeing things, so I didn't say anything. But a couple of my friends who were standing behind me also saw it. So we saw the same thing, which is, after hours, no one's in the palace because it's this laser security system. So everything is viewed from downstairs in the basement. And during the chant, we saw the curtain sort of part like this, and saw this shadow sort of go like this, and then the thing shut. And that little moment for me was like, oh, wow. And that, even now when I'm talking about it, it's just giving me the chills.
And you think it was Queen Lily?
Oh, definitely.
You remind me of her.
Particular room. Go ahead.
You remind me of her. When I was reading about her, she, was adopted, and she was baptized as Christian, and she wrote a book, All Things That Are Similar to You, and she had a foot in 2 worlds. She was very much cared for her people, but then she was trying to negotiate what became the takeover by the U.S. of the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii. And she, very much wanted to keep the peace and but also preserve this tradition. And the more I read about her, the more she just made me think of you. And that's why I was asking about her.
Oh yeah. I mean, she's definitely there. The great thing about her character, which, isn't normally discussed publicly, is that her, sometime during her marriage, her husband, John Dominus, had a child with another Hawaiian woman of lesser rank. And today, of course, in those circumstances, it's just total madness and bedlam. Everybody's trying to kill everybody. You see it on all these reality shows. But Queen Liliuokalani, rather than take that route, decided to take the woman in along with the child and raise the child as her own.
Wow, I did not know that. That's incredible. There's so much
crazy.
It is crazy, but it's beautiful too. And there's so much about Hawaiian culture that I never learned. I feel like there's a link between cultural strength and historical accuracy. And if you can alter the account of history, then you can weaken the links of the cultural connection of an entire people. And the history of Hawaii that I learned, I didn't understand that Hawaii was a sovereign kingdom and that the U.S., did overthrow it basically and took the kingdom. And we're like, now you're a part of the U.S. We celebrate, and then Hawaii became the 50th state, oh gosh, we're skipping over a lot there. Are there parts of Hawaiian history that you wish people would know, more people would know?
Well, beyond Kamehameha the Great, there was an endless lineage of other chiefs, who did specific things here to preserve, the lifeblood of the kingdom. And even when people come here from the continent, hey, what about that king? And, is that how it all started? And, they're tearing down the statues of Confederate, generals and stuff. How come they don't tear down, the king's statue? Because he killed people too. So there's that whole backstory that I think, people need to know about to understand who we are, how we began, and why even today, we're still very, I don't know what the word is, still very staunch, in our cultural history and our cultural spirituality. And so, for instance, if you and I are getting to know each other and we want to welcome you into our circle so that, you get a better understanding of how things work. The first thing we're going to do is feed you. And that's just not you coming to our house, sitting down and have a meal, but that's an open social interaction to, have more exchange. But it's also spiritually feeding you with the kinds of foods that are important to us. And that's sort of the thing that bridges the gap. Food here is the great social interactor.
Yes.
So if you don't get fed, then you're not in.
You're not in. That is good to know for sure. Well, the overthrowing of the Hawaiian government was very much in the interest of, American business ventures, especially pineapple and sugar production. Mm-hmm. And now it's tourism. And so that's what I find so appealing about like how you live in this world is you really have just such a really beautiful paradox about you, that you have a foot with the living, a foot in the dead, a foot in tourism, and a foot deeply in this beautiful Hawaiian culture. And I'm just curious, like, do you ever see a world in which there's reparation for, what the U.S. basically did to the Hawaiian people, how they stripped their right to vote, and then we're like, oh, now, it just was like it's a big cluster, really. Yeah. It's too much to go into in a 30-minute episode, but
I know.
Yeah, there's just so much there. And it's just so interesting that you are kind of in the middle of both of it. Do you see a world where there's reparation and compromise as far as what was done and what is not even really acknowledged in classrooms now? Is there a version of that you wish were happening?
Well, that it is actually being taught in classrooms now. We have a Hawaiian language immersion schools here from preschool all the way up to college. And so the younger Hawaiians now, have been and are being made aware of that part of the history, but they're also being taught that, okay, this happened. It was not good. We were unfairly treated and all this other stuff. But the teachers and the elders say, but don't live here. Mm. Don't get stuck in this. We know what's wrong. We know it has to be righted, but don't stay here. Don't live in this space. Sorry.
It's okay.
Because progress can't happen for our people if we're stagnant in this one place. And so, that's the beauty of it. And I think my kuleana, my responsibility, or whatever it is that I'm here for, is, like you said, to bridge that gap, to not only help people who are not from here understand what's going on in all aspects, but also a lot of local people, are not aware of that part of our history. And it sort of sounds strange, but that's why on all these, I call them experiences because they're really not tours. And that's why in one part of these experiences, I stop and I start asking everybody, what do you do? What's your job? Everybody is very nice about, sharing what they do for a living, but yet more often than not, you'll see someone else in the group and go, hey, I'm an accountant too. I'm a lawyer. What's your practice? And then there's this friendship that's made on this tour. And people keep in touch with each other through that and through myself. And so that's sort of a way that I have people unknowingly interact, and that's why it's really not a tour. It's just this whole experience. And that's what I tell people at the beginning, this is not my experience. I'm the guy talking, but this is actually about you, all of you, and the collective energy you have brought to this thing will determine the course of how this thing goes tonight.
I haven't been on very many experience tours. I've been on mostly historical ghost tours. Yeah. I can't say that in any of what you're describing is what happened there. As we close, I would love for you to share about the Night Marchers, if you're open to that. And
Absolutely.
Then I want people obviously to know how they can engage with your company.
Okay. On the island of Molokai, there was a family that moved from here, Honolulu, to Molokai because the life was just too fast-paced, and they wanted to raise their son in a very a very, not easy lifestyle, but a place that was a lot more open, where people were a lot more kind. And they moved into a house in a place called Ho'olehua on the island of Molokai. And life was great until they noticed that once a month for 4 nights, while they were up listening to the radio or just spending time, the son's bedroom door would open, and they would see him come out of the bedroom and walk down the hallway to the back door leading out to the yard, except he'd walk like this with his hand over his head, and they would go grab him and bring him back to the room. And they noticed that whenever the son came home from school, he would immediately go to the room, his bedroom, and sit in the left corner and face the left corner and just start talking to someone or something that wasn't there. And a lot of times they would ask him, who are you talking to, by the way? He said, oh, my friend. Oh, what friend is that? The Hawaiian man. He likes me. And, I like talking to him. And they thought nothing about it until this thing, 4 nights every month, walking down the hallway to the back door like this. And so they were kind of worried that something might have been mentally wrong with their son. And so they moved everything from the right side of the room to the left side. And then with his bed in one spot, they said he started having these nightmares. And from the room, they could hear sounds like people were marching right through, or just a bunch of feet, and they could hear the son crying out. And so they called a kahuna who came to the house, and the kahuna looked at the house and said, do you mind if I go around the house? And he said, yes, fine. And he walks around the house, and he says, do you mind if I go inside? And he said, oh, yeah, sure. Do you mind if I go into your son's bedroom? They said, no, that's perfectly fine. And he goes into the bedroom, looks around, and goes, Then they go inside, and he says, underneath the left corner of your son's room is buried a very old Hawaiian man. This was his land, and he's buried here on his land, and your house is right there at the left corner over his place where his body is. Oh, no. Is that the ghost that's harassing our son? No. Not harassing, protecting. That old man's spirit, that old Hawaiian man, he loves your son. He's been protecting him. But, you did something wrong. You moved something around a certain way. What do you mean? You're talking about your son coming out of the room 4 nights every month like this. You sort of moved something that wasn't supposed to be moved. And now the night marchers are coming right to your house, and they're taking your son. They're grabbing him by the hand, trying to take him out of the house. That old Hawaiian man, his spirit is the one that's been protecting your son. And so now you have to put everything back, because if you don't, the next time they come through this house, they are going to take him, and you will never see him again. You guys are not Hawaiian. So when night marchers come to a place with no Hawaiians, they always have to take one person. And if you don't do something, you don't listen to me, this time it's going to be your boy. So they did what the kahuna said, and everything was fine. And today, the boy is still around, now a man, but everyone says if you ask him about that specific experience during that time of his life, he doesn't remember it. But his parents do, and they tell that story all the time. Wow.
And these are people you personally know, or this is a story passed down?
This is the people who told the story to my boss, Glenn Grant, who I met in his office one time, and he introduced me to them.
Oh, wow.
Very nice people.
Wow, that's incredible. I've learned so much in our chat and in preparation for this chat. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I know how busy you are, and with the time difference, I'm so grateful that we could connect today. As we close, can you tell people your website, socials, anything that you want to share to allow people to engage more with what you've got going on?
Sure. The social media is Mysteries of Hawaii, except on Facebook, it's Mysteries of Honolulu. And the website is mysteries-of-hawaii.com. And same thing with the YouTube channel, Mysteries of Hawaii.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lopaka. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. This was a fun experience, and I hope we get to do this again.
Me too. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.